Everdark, Episode 85, Something New. Last on Everdark, Christian argues against Balthazar using compulsion on Daemon so that the Kali vampire will tell him everything he knows about Christian's gift. He believes he can take that knowledge and teach Christian from it. Christian disagreed that such a thing would work, but more importantly, he doesn't want anyone compelled for his sake. We now turn back to Julian and Damon. Potential trigger warning. Tentacle sex after midpoint of chapter. Damon picked up his sleeping fledgling and carried Julian from their bedroom into the garden. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, and the garden was in twilight. It was a magical time where things were thinnest between what was and what could be. It was a time when Damon was most at home, alive and dead, here and not here. The distinction between the earth and the Everdark was almost gone at this time. The few vampires that were in Ravenscroft Manor were mostly asleep. None had left their bedrooms yet. He sent a command that they stay away from the garden for a time. He wanted it for him and Julian alone. There was a wave of assent. They accepted his rule without thought now. That would spread to all the other vampires, even those that Kali tried to imprison in lasting with him. Nowhere was safe from his power and influence. Kali knew that, hence his attempt at having Julian kidnapped. It was good that Elena decided to do what was sensible. Yet I am not certain of her. There is something very brittle about this new determination. Perhaps I should strip her mind of Heath's memory, and not wait for Balthazar to return and do it. But the thought left him as he dug his toes into the grass that was cool and damp with dew. It crushed beneath his bare feet, letting out a fresh, green scent. The flowers were bobbing up and down with the slight breezes. Their perfume was sweet, just this side of cloying. The crisp, cold scent of water from the fountain added a pleasant, refreshing tang. Julian's head lolled against his shoulder, making soft, sleepy sounds as Damon settled down into a cross-legged position on a swath of grass in the center of the garden. The chirr of night insects, the peep of birds as they settled in for sleep on the branches of nearby trees, and the gurgle of the water feature nearby settled pleasantly over Damon. Damon cradled Julian's body against his own, holding him effortlessly as he started to commune. Tendrils reached up from the ground. He opened his body to them and they entered him. The entire earth thumped like a beating heart. Damon smiled. So much life, so much power. He centered himself by listening to Julian's breathing and heartbeat. The steady thump of Julian's heart was so comforting. His breathing was light and slow. He was still deeply asleep, despite being moved and the difference in temperature. He was with Damon, and that meant safety and comfort no matter what else changed. Damon's smile softened. His fledgling, his child. How could the immortals have sent their fledglings and their fledglings' off into battle with so little thought? To treat them as cannon fodder was inconceivable. He leaned down and kissed Julian's forehead. Julian made a pleased sound and settled down further into his arms. My Julian, my brave warrior, you were good about not speaking your mind about Heath. You are beginning to understand. Not that you didn't tell me your thoughts, just not out loud. Julian slept on. You are a fast learner. You teach me things as well. Damon now stretched out his senses to Ravenscroft Manor. More vampires were stirring. There was a sense of happiness and excitement among them. They were all speaking or thinking about what had happened in Solace. Some were crowing about how lucky, or smart, they had been to put their lot in with Balthazar. He was Eiros, after all, and now, instead of being exiled, they were favored house to the vampire king. Others in House Ravenscroft were worried. They believed, likely rightly, that there would be those that would fear them. These people would want to attack now, before he was at full strength. Those who were worried about them were settling patrols and sending out their sensors to read any minds that came near the manor. He smiled at this. He was glad that they were protective. This, too, was good. And then there were those who wondered what he would do next. They were certain that he would end Cully's influence and take over the vampires. But what would he do after that? There would be more. They knew there would be more. And they were right. This world needed order. It needed a strong and capable leader. This skulking in shadows, being fearful of being discovered, was not something he approved of. Humanity should want to join the vampires, and those that were unfit to join should serve. But he needed to know more about the people in this time and in this world. He stretched his senses out farther and felt all the life of the city around them. There were tens of thousands of minds that he touched briefly. There was a young woman who was sitting on an outside balcony with a glass of Chardonnay in one hand. Her head was tilted to the side as she contemplated her lover, who was cooking dinner for her just inside. He was bustling from refrigerator to stovetop, humming under his breath as he read the recipe. This was their first anniversary of living together. Damon could see their future together, one in which they married and had 3 children, 2 boys and a girl. But then there was the other option, one in which Damon ruled openly. The 2 of them had split up. The woman had joined a resistance to the vampires. Her face was haggard, no longer peaceful. She was running, always running, especially when the dark came, mistakenly believing that she was safe during the day. Her partner was not with her. He had become an acolyte for a Wyvern house. His days and nights were spent in drugged-out bliss. He didn't remember his former fiancée. He didn't even dream of her while she mourned him every moment of every day. Then there was the drug dealer standing in the doorway of a bar. Now he sold the drugs of choice, from cocaine to meth. He was too thin and sniffed constantly from using his own products. One future ended up with him riddled with bullets in a dark, stinking alley. And then there was the other future. The drug dealer was not thin anymore. His skin was clear, but his eyes were too bright. He'd been hired by one of the Asher blood dens to lure humans in with the potential of immortality. He smiled constantly at his prey, though he would not be feeding off of them. He was living off of them. There was an elderly man on the street, holding his blonde granddaughter's hand as they crossed the street together. He was smiling, though there was pain in his back and hips. But there was dissatisfaction in the man's mind. Now that he was old, no one remembered the titan of industry he had been. No one sought his counsel. No one took him seriously at all. He knew that his granddaughter's father, his son, wanted to put him in a home where he would rot away and die. Damon saw his futures too, one in which he was lying, seemingly asleep, but truly dead in a casket. The same granddaughter was now weeping. And then there was the other future. This elderly man had been turned. His mind, experience, and drive would not be lost to death. He would join their ranks and swiftly climb them. He would welcome the years because it meant more power for him. The granddaughter would grow up and join her grandfather. They would become a powerhouse together. Then there was the middle-aged woman who was seated alone in her house, lights off, head bowed low. Her wife had just passed away 2 weeks ago, hit by a car, gone in a second. They had been planning a vacation in a place brimming with sunlight and margaritas. Tears slid down her cheeks, and in her hands was a bottle of pills, sleeping pills. She wanted to sleep forever. If he did nothing, she would be dead this year. And then there was the other future. She smiled up into the face of her vampire lover. Her face beamed with happiness. She turned her head to the side, exposing her throat. Her lover bent down and drank, and drank, and drank. Then the vampire cut her own wrist with the fingernails of her opposite hand and pressed that bleeding wrist against the woman's lips. Now it was the human's turn to drink and to change. Damon's mind went through dozens, hundreds, thousands of different futures for the people just in this city. But these were just individual fates. He wanted to see more of the macro level of the future. His mind showed him the planet, spinning in the dark vastness of space. Pinpoints of light appeared on the globe. They showed the locations of where his immortals would establish their home cities, but all bloodlines seeded the earth. He saw world leaders bowing to the immortals, and the immortals bowing to him. Then his vision spread out. He could see factions. There were those that welcomed the vampires with a sense of awe and empowerment. The world was more amazing than they had been led to believe. Vampires and immortals were magic made real. Both their nightmares and dreams become flesh. The opportunity to become more was available to some of them. They would vie to become vampires. They would vie to embrace all things vampire. Then there were those who believed the devil's reign had started and that they had been left behind. Religions changed as they incorporated the vampires fully into their mythology as fallen angels. The vampires were to be resisted. To be turned into one was to lose God. There were those that treated vampires like they already did celebrities and politicians, basically as people who they would never meet, never know, and certainly never be a part of. But there would be new universities with vampire professors that they wanted their children to get into, because they were more prestigious and the key to the locks of success. And there was the secular resistance, who feared what the vampires might do to humanity in the end. After all, humanity was the vampires' food source, and humans were notorious for their self-destructive tendencies. What if the vampires decided to make sure that source of food would always be there? Maybe the vampires would alter humanity so that it would produce extra blood, like some of the cow varieties there were. Would they be bred in pens so that the best traits, for vampires anyway, would be in abundance? There was nothing in this possible future that surprised him. There would be many nuances that he would have to understand before he acted. But he would act. He already knew that. First Calais, and then the world. At that moment, Julian stirred awake in his arms. My dearest acolytes, I regret to inform you that this particular platform's Inquisition has decided that sexy vampire interludes are not within the bounds of community guidelines. Therefore, this episode has been cut to be acceptable to audiences of all ages. Not to worry. If you are interested in hearing the full episode, with all of the steamy parts included, you can purchase a monthly membership at wraithrain.com. Not ready to commit to a monthly membership? Then please visit the shop at wraithrain.com, where the full episodes are available for sale in audiobook format. I wonder just what it is that the community is afraid of hearing. Perhaps something they'd like. The community protests too much, methinks.